When you bring a new puppy into your life, the last thing you want is for them to suffer from a horrible genetic condition that could have been prevented had you known a test was available. There's also some other things that you can do as an owner to make sure that the breed best suits you and your lifestyle, and also that your new puppy is as happy and healthy as possible.
Welcome to the Call the Vet Show, the podcast that helps keep your furry family as healthy as possible so they can live the full and happy life they deserve. And here's your host, veterinarian Dr. Alex Avery.
Well, hello out there. Welcome to another episode of the Call the Vet Show. We're on episode number 71, if you can believe it. And this, if you've not listened before, is the podcast that helps you care for your dog and cat to the best of your ability, helping answer any questions that you have, taking deep dives into certain topics that I think are really important for every pet owner to know about. And I've also started interviewing other pet health experts and pet care experts so that we can share experiences from people across the whole world. So if that sounds like something that you're interested in, then make sure that you hit that subscribe button if you're not already, so that you don't miss out on any of my future episodes. Some of them are a little bit longer. Certainly the interviews tend to be a little bit longer, the deep dives, and some are shorter, bite-sized pieces of information. So really there is something for every pet owner wherever you are in your journey. And today I'm talking all about puppy health, but how that relates to future dog health, as you'll see in today's question. But before I get into that, I also talk a lot about how you can keep your dog and your cat as happy and healthy as possible in my free Pet Health Essentials guide. Now, this tackles number of different topics that you can do as a pet owner. Every single pet owner can follow these steps, and it will actually help prevent some of the most common and challenging, and also those diseases that have the biggest impact on your pet's quality of life. So if that sounds like a guide that you'd be interested in, simply head over to ourpetshealth.com where you can download it for free today. But that's it from me with the intro. Let's get into today's question.
Hi, Dr. Alex. Here's a question for you. I actually wrote it out. I've had two dogs, and had little knowledge of health risks going into that. And neither dog made it to its 10th birthday. I didn't know that much about genetic health risks, and it was sort of heartbreaking to watch these dogs go through pretty serious health issues as they got somewhat older, and to have them both have to be put down. So I want to go look for a new dog or puppy, and I really want to be, thoughtful and know the most I can about health risks as I go into it. I basically just want a medium-sized dog. I like the poodle hybrid, low-shed dogs, want a really sweet disposition, and the longer lifespan, of course, the better. What do you recommend? And also, what documentation or testing or other due diligence should I do to make sure that I'm actually making a good choice? Thank you so much for what you do, and I hope you answer this question.
So first things first, I'm really sorry, Alan, to hear that you've been through that experience with not just one, but with two dogs. And it's completely understandable that you're wanting to make sure with your next dog that you do as much as possible to make sure that they stay as healthy as they absolutely can be. What I guess with genetic diseases, there's a whole range of different genetic conditions that our pets can suffer from. Some of them can have very little impact on a dog's life. Some of them can be pretty debilitating, but not life-threatening, and others can absolutely be fatal. And it is certainly in everybody's best interest to try and do as much as we can to eliminate a lot of these genetic diseases from the breeding population. And thankfully, we are going some way towards that. And certainly compared to when I first graduated as a vet and was going through vet school, there's now an awful lot more tests that are much more readily available for some of these genetic conditions. in other situations, there are tests are available, but they're only run by a couple of different institutions. So it might be that they're not available to kind of where you are in the world, or if you're sending tests off, then it can take some time to come back because they have to be sent overseas. And certainly with the current situation with postage problems and shipping delays and things like that, that may be problematic. Now, if we're thinking of Labradoodles in particular, now I don't actually have a big Labradoodle population as part of my my patient base, so I guess I don't have a really in-depth working knowledge of the Labradoodle and have have lots of different patients to draw my personal experiences from. But as far as I'm kind of aware and concerned, Labradoodles as a purebred dog are actually pretty healthy, and they don't suffer from a huge number of high-risk debilitative genetic diseases. Now, the exception to this really is because of the Labrador kind of part of their breeding is joint disease. So joint dysplasia, where the bones don't grow and the joints don't form as ideally as possible. And thinking here really elbow dysplasia and hip dysplasia. And while that is not kind of a fatal condition in the truest sense of the word, it does result in debilitating arthritis, which has a huge impact on the quality of life of a dog if they're suffering from severe arthritis, and especially if that goes unrecognized and untreated for any length of time. But arthritis is a fatal disease because ultimately it will get to a stage where an individual is so painful that the treatment isn't successful or isn't able to manage their quality of life appropriately. And so they get euthanized prematurely before they otherwise would. Now, there's other ways that we can mitigate arthritis, and we can mitigate the impact of joint disease and hip dysplasia and elbow dysplasia through weight management and exercise management and all that kind of thing. And clearly this isn't the time and place to go into that on this episode. But we can also have a look at the parents of any puppy. So ideally they would have hip scores and elbow scores done before breeding. Now what this means is that x-rays are taken of the hips and elbows in certain conditions. Those are sent off to a grading scheme and a score comes back. And what we want to do is we want to select dogs who have low scores as parents. We don't want to breed from dogs that have high scores because they're much more likely to pass on that bad conformation to their offspring. Now, this isn't an exact science, and it's not 100% certainty that the puppies of parents with good hip scores and good elbow scores are going to be completely free of this disease, but it makes it less likely. And it's certainly something that I would encourage everyone to do, whether you're looking for a Labradoodle or a Labrador Retriever as well, because the incidence of hip problems, hip dysplasia is really high. Now, other genetic conditions with Labradoodles are thankfully pretty rare. There is a slightly higher incidence of a disease called progressive retinal atrophy, which is where you get blindness developing, and this is actually something that can be tested for as well, which is fantastic. So there is a blood test that can be run for that to see if that is a genetic problem that needs to be considered in that line. Now, there's also another resource if you're looking for other breeds. There's another resource, and it's OFA.org. I'll leave a link in the show notes to that. So you can look up lots of the genetic problems that can be tested for in a whole load of other breeds. So whether you're looking for a Labradoodle or any other breed, the chances are it's going to be in that list. One thing to bear in mind, though, and one thing to think about with genetic testing is that not all genetic problems can be tested for. They don't have a test that shows that there's a high incidence or a high chance of that trait or that disease passing on to the puppy. So there's a couple of clear examples here, not thinking about Labradoodles specifically or similar dogs, but just dogs in general. And these examples would be atopy in the West Highland White Terrier. So that is an allergic skin disease. Now, Westies are really seriously prone to this condition, but it's not something that can be tested for to know whether that's a genetic trait that's going to be passed on to puppies. Another one in common breeds of today is brachycephalic obstructive airway syndrome. So that is a condition in flat-faced dogs, our squash-nosed breeds, so our pugs, our French bulldogs, that kind of thing, where we get problems because of the conformation of their airways, their narrow nostrils, their small, very narrow windpipes that cause all kinds of problems with their breathing. That means that they then need surgery to have any kind of good quality of life. And then another classic one would be intervertebral disc disease in Dachshunds. So that's slip discs to you and me. Dachshunds are a breed that are really prone to that, but it's not something that you can test for to say whether one individual is more likely to have that problem than another. Again, it all goes back to weight management and things like that can really reduce the risk of that. But these are all conditions that you should be aware of as a new owner of a puppy if you're choosing one of these breeds, because it will then allow you to really concentrate on managing them specifically in different ways to reduce the impact that those potential diseases could have, or the potential risk of those actually ever rearing their head in the first place. So I hope that helps a little bit when it comes to thinking about genetic conditions and how you can know whether your particular puppy or the particular breed that you're thinking about is suffering from any of those situations, any of those conditions. Now, if we're thinking about alternatives to the Labradoodle, kind of low shed dogs that are kind of a medium size, well, a Schnauzer is another low shedding dog breed. They tend to be really great characters. Certainly in my experience, they're really kind of sweet natured and they're, fantastic characters. Their biggest health risk, again, in my experience, is kind of diabetes and pancreatitis, especially if they're overweight. Weight always seems to come back to come to the forefront of things whenever I'm talking about things, but really that's how important it is just in any dog, regardless of breed. Other breeds to think about would be something like a Border Terrier. Now, they are a smaller dog, a smaller breed dog. They're a particular favourite of mine, but they're a low shed dog, and I kind of think of them actually as a big breed dog in a little dog's body. So if you don't think you're a small dog person and you'd rather a medium or a bigger breed dog, then a Border Terrier is still one to consider. And then you've got other breeds like the Airedale Terrier, the Greyhound, the Wheaton Terrier. There's various other low shed dogs out there. Some of them are more niche, and it might be hard to kind of find a particular breed like that in your area, but other low shed dogs are much more common. Now, kind of finally, a final suggestion for Alan: if you are thinking of getting a Labradoodle still, then certainly consider selecting one from a different genetic line than your previous dogs. And that's assuming that obviously that your previous two dogs did suffer from a genetic condition, which I'm anticipating given your question, and also that they were related as well. Your vet might be able to suggest a local breeder, but there are other ways that you can get recommendations. I mean, there's Facebook pages, there's different notice boards, there's different local communities of dog enthusiasts who might be able to suggest a local breeder who'd be able to provide you with a healthy puppy. Also, if possible, you might be able to get some references from a breeder. If you speak to them and you're interested in them, maybe ask them for the details of people who have previously bought their puppies who you could then talk to and talk about the health of their dogs to give you some idea of how healthy they are in the long term. And I'd also encourage anyone who's looking for a new puppy to also, as well as going to visit the breeder, go and see the parents, go and meet the dogs, go and see the mother with the puppy that you're thinking of bringing home and bringing into your family, because that's going to make you comfortable with how they're raised and optimize the chance that they're actually happy and healthy when you first bring them home. The last thing you want to do is meet somebody by the side of the road at a service station or somewhere, a little bit less typical, and have a handover there, because unfortunately there's still a big problem with puppy mills, with puppy farms, with illicit breeding, and puppies being brought home and immediately suffering from quite serious health conditions. So absolutely, we want to avoid that. So I hope that answers your question, Alan. I hope it gives you some practical advice and practical tips that you can use to make sure that your future dog is as happy and healthy as possible. And I'd really love to hear, what breed you end up going with, and even sending some pictures through. That would be fantastic. I hope it's given anybody out there as well, if you're thinking about bringing a puppy home. I've also got some other great information over on the website that talks about how to keep your puppy healthy once you bring them home, some key steps that you can take to make sure that they do stay happy and that they stay comfortable. Talks about things like socialization, like weight control, and various other strategies that are really so important for puppies in particular, but also for older dogs, and it sets you up for a life of health. Also, make sure you check out that free guide that I mentioned in the intro. It's called Pet Health Essentials, and I'll leave links to that and all of the other posts in the show notes. But until next time, I'm Dr. Alex. This is the Call the Vet Show, and until next time, take care.
Thanks for listening to Call the Vet. For full show notes and any links mentioned in today's show, head over to callthevet.org, where you can also submit your question to be featured on an upcoming episode. We'll see you next time.